legends. You'll hear that he started from very humble beginnings to owning a Dale Meyers, a business that had a staff of 450. His life had many twists and turns, and born in 1941. He also in 1990 he received a terrible diagnosis of cancer, and he's beaten cancer a number of times. It's all part of his story, well worth listening to. So hearing a man that's continued to be positive through the tragedies of his life, and has been a marvellous ambassador for the military, and he invested in his own military museum, which is now the second best military museum in Australia, and it's right here in Maryborough. There's about $17 million worth of artefacts there, and it's well worth a look. So we'll now have the conversation with John. You'll hear of a humble man who's got a great sense of humour. Thank you.
Great to be here.
Okay, we've got one rule here, John. It's tell the truth, or at least don't lie on this conversation.
I'll work on it.
Good on you, good on you. I think you said Gough Whitlam back years ago nearly made the same sort of statement.
Well, it was to do with that when there were those spook stations there in central Queensland, or
Pine
Central
Rivers?
Australia, Pine Ridge or something, where when he was the opposition leader, he said, when I become Prime Minister, he says, I'll spill the beans on what that's all about. Anyway, sure enough, he got in as Prime Minister in 72, and he was asked the same question, and he come back with a response something like, I don't ever tell a lie, but I don't always tell the truth. So
And that was the last message he gave on
that's right.
Pine Ridge.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So just tell us, where were you? Let's start at the beginning. So where were you born? And just around to those early stages.
Where was I born?
I know you're 10 years older than me.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm a 41 model.
Yeah.
I was born here in Maryborough on the 3rd of December 1941. My father and mother was Percy and Grace Myers, and they had a dairy farm at Tyro. And it was during the war years. I always reckoned that the Japanese created their invasions because they heard about me being born 4 days before their invasion. Because they invaded, they raided Honolulu, Hawaii on the 7th of December 41, and I was born on the 3rd of December 41.
They were coming after you.
Anyway, it was a sad early life in our family because in 1942 I lost one of my brothers who was only about 2 years and 7 months, and I've always said I was to blame for it. What happened was we were on a dairy farm at Tyro, and it would appear that I was ill this particular day, and my mother and father wanted to take me to the doctor in Maryborough. And anyway, so they took me over and left me with an aunt who was on the property next door, and she had a pretty big family, and her husband was away at the war, my uncle. And anyway, so then they took me off to Maryborough, and around about lunchtime, the aunt comes out to the back door. Us kids would have been out in the yard, or not, the kids would have been out in the yard playing. And she says, "Righto, come on, it's lunchtime." And my brother decides, oh, it's lunchtime, that means I got to go home for lunch. So he, only 2 years and something like 7 months of age, he heads across the paddock in the long grass, and he fell into a creek bed and smacked his head on a log and drowned in the creek.
Yeah.
He was found there about an hour later by somebody that was on horseback. So that was a sad start to the family, and then I already had an my eldest sister was Barbara. You would have met Barbara.
Yeah, yep.
She died back in 2012.
Mm.
And anyway, then in 1945, we lost another one of my brothers, Tom, and he had double pneumonia and died here in the hospital in Maryborough. So it was a sad early days for the family.
Mm.
Anyway, I started school here at Tyro in 1948 and spent most of my schooling years at Tyro until 1954 when Dad and Mum and I went and lived in Brisbane for 6 years. And my sister, who got married, Barbara, got married back in 52. Her and her husband, Rob, they took over the dairy farm.
Right.
So they ran it from 54 to 1960 when we came back to the farm again.
So where did you go to school in Brisbane?
I went to the best one nowadays, or recognised as one of the best, the Brisbane State High School.
Oh, righto.
It's got a very
it still has.
extreme record as far as education is concerned.
And that's a government school. That's not a private school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a state school.
still got a great reputation.
Mm.
Yep. So what sort of work did your dad do in Brisbane?
Oh, he worked for, believe it or not, a air conditioning company, just as a storeman.
Air conditioning was then?
Carrier Air.
Oh, yeah.
Carrier Air Conditioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the early 50s, 1955, 54, 55, air conditioning was only in its infancy.
Yeah.
And one of the first major jobs that was ever done by Carrier Air was the what was then the new Princess Alexandria Hospital there at South Brisbane.
Right.
Because that was only a brand new building in the 1950s.
Mm. Mm.
Now it's been wrecked and they've put a new one up.
Yeah. Yep. So then your early work. So you've finished your schooling in Brisbane.
Yes, I finished school in 57.
Yep.
But not long before I finished school, I ended up with a bad bout of rheumatic fever, which I was in hospital in Brisbane for 3 months, from about the 25th of August till the 25th of November, 1957. And anyway, I was not getting any better. They used to do these blood tests, and I just lingered there for 13 or 12 weeks, and then the specialist, a fellow by the name of Dr. Hewitt, with his he used to come around with his entourage every couple of days, and I'll never forget. You know, back in those days, they used to smoke cigarettes while they were walking around the hospital ward.
Yeah.
Anyway, he says to his entourage one morning, "You know, I'm going to try this young fella on this new drug called cortisone."
Right.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So anyway, up until then, they'd been feeding me on all these different drugs that weren't helping at all. And anyway, would you believe that within 1 week of starting on this cortisone that I was home?
Amazing. Yep.
Just like that,
Yeah, yeah.
after 12 weeks, and a pretty dodgy heart too. And I've been fortunate that the heart over the years has rebuilt itself.
Right.
But, it was...
You've certainly, and we'll get to that, you've spent a lot of time in and out of hospitals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
As we go through the small part of your life that I know about. So,
anyway, I then started work for a livestock commission agent in Brisbane called Fitzsimmons and Company. They were the equivalent or a smaller equivalent to places like Dalgety and Elders,
Yeah.
Goldsborough Moor,
Yep.
all those
Stock and station
livestock
agent.
agents.
Yep.
And we used to have the lamb and pig and calf sales on a Tuesday at Cannon Hill sale yards.
So what was your role there?
I was a clerk, come a stockman.
Yep.
So on the Tuesdays, I always worked with the pigs.
Yep.
On a Tuesday, and then on the Thursday I'd work with the cattle. We had cattle and sheep on the Thursdays, and I worked with the cattle on the Thursday. So I'd be the fella who'd be waiting there at the ramp when the trucks arrived, and then I'd take the cattle from there down to wherever we were going to, whatever pens we were going to put them in for the sale.
Yep, right. So you did the part-time job, or was that a full-time job?
That was a full-time job, yep. And then on the Monday, Wednesday and Friday, I would work at the office, preparing for the sale, doing the invoicing, and all that sort of thing.
No computers in those days?
No computers, and every calculation had to be worked out, with paper and pen.
Even no calculators?
No calculators, no. Like, for instance, you might sell 33 pigs, let's say 33 sheep at £2, 3 and 9pence each.
Yeah,
so you had to work out what that was and make out the invoice. But I mean, we're talking hundreds of invoices per sale.
So were any of those invoices ever disputed on your mathematics?
Well, one of the other fellows in the office, his job was to check my work.
Yeah.
After I'd done the invoicing, I'd pass them over to him, and he, as part of his work, was to check them. And I got to say, I was pretty good at maths, and have been all my life, sort of thing. But I must, as you get older, though, you get a bit foggy in the head,
a bit lazier,
and you rely too much on calculators instead of using your brain.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Having done a lot of accounting, yes, I couldn't do it. But anyway, you use calculators and computers now and the whole lot.
Anyway, we did that for 2 years, and then that's when I went back to the farm in 1960 with my father and mother.
So you're 19-year-old, you're back home. Yep.
Yeah, 18, 19.
Yep.
Yeah, and so then I worked on the farm until 1964, when I in the meantime, in 1961, believe it or not, I broke my leg pretty bad with a horse accident. So really, over the next couple of years, I was recovering from that. Trying to help on the farm where I could, but getting around the leg in plaster, and it didn't. The initial break didn't repair well, mend well, and so therefore I had to have it rebroken, and so it dragged on for quite a long time. Anyway, in 1962, I met this lovely lady who became my wife, Elsie, and she was a Maryborough girl, born here. I used to work at St Stephen's Hospital, and of course nowadays she's very upset that St Stephen's ain't anymore,
It's
like
still
here
empty.
in Maryborough.
Still empty.
And anyway, so we got married on the 24th of August, 1963, and in early 64, I started work for the Main Roads Department as a cost clerk out in Western Queensland, started at St George, actually.
So for our listeners, just to explain what a cost clerk is.
Yeah, cost clerk is it's a clerk that works on a main roads permanent works job, back in those days, most of our roadworks were done by the department itself, as against nowadays it's all contract work.
Yep.
And so, of course, you need somebody out on the job that works out what the men are going to get paid and order all the materials that they need for the job, keep a ledger on the costing of the job, and just responsible for all the clerical work on that job. And the
So
job
making sure it comes in at the estimated prices, or
trying to,
yeah,
yes.
that's always been the goal of the cost clerk.
And it was some of the jobs could have anything up to 80 men working on them, and we're out in the sticks, you know, like we're no TV, no. I remember the first job I was on was one of the last jobs in the main roads in Queensland, where all the men, not the cost clerks or the foremen, but all the men were under tentage.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they come with their tents.
No, the department supplied all the tents. They're all lined up like an army camp out in the middle of nowhere.
And then there'd be cooks.
Cooks, yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yep. And
I'll never forget we had this female cook in the camp, and she was all rough bird. She was living with one of the labourers on the job, you know. Anyway, it was middle of winter, and in the middle of winter I used to always make sure I had my shower in the middle of the day, not in the cool of the morning or the cool of the night, because it gets pretty cold out around St George. Anyway, so I just walk into the shower, and here's this woman here, stark naked, having a shower, and because it was a big open area shower with just a tent around, canvas around the outside, you know. And she said, "It's all right, you can come in." I said, "Oh, you've got to be joking, my wife's having that camp." And our first child, Jeff, he was born only about a month or so before we started out in the main roads camp. So,
right.
you know, he was with us right from day one.
So the wives would come out as well. So wife and family would, but they'd get a house in town or something.
No.
In the camp? In the
camp,
tents?
we had huts.
Oh, right. So you were...
Yeah, we're in the upper level, you know.
So the clerical were upper.
The foreman and the cost clerk were the only ones that were given privileges.
So a fair amount of power, you know, sort of might have gone to a young man's head a little bit in those days. That's probably where you would have learnt how to deal with a variety of types of people in those days.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'll tell you what, there's some rough people working in the main roads camps out there in the 1960s.
Yeah, well...
They... a lot of them were escaping from paying maintenance on, families and that sort of thing. Because the police, when it was payday, back in those days, everybody got paid in cash.
Yep.
The pay cart would come out from St George. The local council, Ballon Shire, used to do the paying of the men for us.
Yep.
And they'd have a police escort, and all these fellas would all head bush, and the foreman would have to collect their money, and then when the police had left, they'd come back out of the bush again, and the foreman would hand out their money to them.
Yeah. It's a bit different these days. It's very little cash, and everyone gets paid, by computer, which I think's a bit of a. I've always said it's a shame because the boss, when he hands the pay or a cheque, it went from cash to cheque to then and now it's automatic bank transfer. But there's a lack of a relationship building between the staff member and the owner of the business or the boss when it's just automatically the pay goes in, rather than having that time to continue to build a relationship.
Yeah,
But we'll
yeah.
get onto that a little
Yeah.
bit later. So you did the main roads for how long?
Oh well, I was out in the field from around about April '64 until only about 12 months actually. About April '65, the boss wanted me to come and work in the office in Warwick, in the district office.
Yep.
So we actually bought a house in Warwick in '65, and I started work in the office.
Do you remember how much the house was?
Oh yeah, around about £3,000.
So that's $6,000 for our young listeners.
Oh,
$6,000.
$6,000.
Do you remember what your pay was?
Around about 20 to £25 a week.
Yep. That's a fairly good pay.
Yeah, it was compared to what most people were getting.
So that's about 6 years you could own a house, more or less, on the gross pay. Yep.
And but we only stayed there for about eight months. We still owned the house, but my mother took ill with cancer here in Maryborough at Tyra.
They were still doing the farm.
And it was too much for Dad to run the farm on his own, so it was decided to, I agreed to resign from the main roads and come back and work on the farm.
Right.
And
big decision.
It was a big decision. So we shifted from Warwick back to Tyro, and for the next 15 months we worked on the farm. But it was a strained relationship between my father and myself. He was very, very. He was a very, what's the word?
Controller?
He was one of the old brigade that everything had to be done at the same time every day in exactly the same manner, and I was one of the new breed that didn't sort of conform with that, I mean,
it's still there.
If the cows, he had to start milking the cows at 3:15 every afternoon, not 3:20, not 3:10, 3:15, right?
Yep.
When the grandfather clock struck 3:15,
he was out.
He put the cigarette out and away he was to the dairy, Well, John Myers, if he got there at 3:30 or 3:45, well, So anyway, the farm ended up being sold. And my boss at the main road said to me when I left, he said, "John, if ever you want a job again, just give me a ring and there'll be a job there for you." Right?
Yep.
And so I rang him up. This is in 1967, and said, "I'd like to come back." And he said, "Yep. When do you want to start?"
Right.
And when he put me on, they didn't need a cost clerk. Like he had to find a job for me.
Yep.
But you sort of, it doesn't take long to after I start again to fit back into the system again, and away you go.
And that was back in Warwick?
That was in Warwick, yes.
Yep. So back to the house.
No, not in the
purchased?
office. I had to go back out in the field again.
Oh, yeah.
And so I spent the next 3 years actually out in the field, and we had a wonderful time. We started a place called Thames Creek, which is out between Clifton and Carrara on the if you're heading out towards Gundawindi on that road near Leeburn. And we were there for a few months. Then we went to a place called Nobby, between, it's not far from Clifton, and we built a bridge there. And we were there exactly 12 months. The day we arrived, 12 months later was the day we left, and we went to Ellery, and we did the bypass of the town of Ellery.
These are all places out near Toowoomba, aren't they?
That's
out
right.
That way.
Alra, up until then, used to the main road from Toowoomba to Warwick used to go through the main street of Alra.
Yeah, righto.
Nowadays it bypasses it, and anyway, so we're there for from August 68 to around about June 69, something like that. I went to a job out near Inglewood. And we were there until the end of the year when the boss rang me up again and says, I'd like you to come to to the office in Warwick.
Yep.
So I got a very good job there. I was the district engineer's clerk, which means that I was sat in his office with him, and anything he wanted done, I was the fellow that went and did it for him.
Right. So you weren't an engineer, you hadn't done engineering or anything, but
No.
you would have learned a lot from him in regards engineering.
Oh, well, no, I was still doing clerical work.
All right.
Doing his clerical work for him, you know.
Yep.
And one of my jobs was we used to have to put in these cost returns. All the jobs throughout the whole district had to put in cost returns once a month.
Yep.
And one of my jobs was checking those to make sure that the all the different cost clerks throughout the district had done them accurately, and if not, correct them or to go to the engineers.
Yeah. Yep.
So you had anything up to about 6 or 8 engineers working within the district in the office building there.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, I was only there for around about, believe it or not, about 5 months, and they were calling. There were an application went out throughout Queensland for an inspecting cost clerk at Toowoomba. And it was a real tongue-in-the-cheek thing. I thought, oh, I'll put in for this, you know. And you wouldn't believe it, but I ended up getting the job.
So about what age were you then?
I was only about 28.
Yeah.
And it was quite an achievement because the main roads had been going since about 1920, and cost clerks and inspecting cost clerks had been in existence ever since then.
Yep.
So we're now talking 1970, 50 years later. And here I am at 28 years of age. I was the youngest inspecting cost clerk ever appointed in the main roads department. Because I think the next it was one of those type of jobs that it was an old man's job,
Yeah, that's right.
as an inspector.
Yeah.
And here I am at 28. Now, it really raised a few eyebrows
I'm sure.
because the next youngest, I think, was something like about 40,
Yeah.
ever appointed.
Yep.
And I didn't have another thing about becoming an inspector. Usually you had something like about 20 years background
Experience. Yeah.
And I never, all I had was a few years. But I was very fortunate that a lot of the cost clerks up at Toowoomba had put in for the job, but there was a lot of conflicts within between them all.
Yeah.
And the bosses knew that, well, this fellow wouldn't get on with this one, and this one wouldn't get on with that one, and so on. So it was decided to get a bit of new blood into the district.
Yeah.
And of course, when I arrived there, well, it really put a lot of noses out of joint. Here's this 28-year-old. I've been a cost clerk for 30 years. Why didn't I get the job? So anyway, I did that for 5 years. But in the meantime, back in 1968, I joined the Army Reserve, and I stayed in that for 25 years. And I've always believed that time in the been with the main roads, and also as in the Army Reserve, helped me a hell of a lot as far as later life, as far as management was concerned, you know. Because with that job at the main roads, I all of a sudden, here I am, a person that's just a clerk, and all of a sudden I'm an inspector, and I've got about 20 fellas underneath me, and as well as being responsible for the cost clerk, supervision-wise, the cost clerk that's in every shire in the district.
Yeah.
And there was something like about 12 shires in the Toowoomba district. So one of my jobs was to go out to all these different jobs, make sure that these people are doing their jobs properly.
Yep.
To employ new staff. If somebody leaves, find somebody to replace them.
Yeah.
And put in reports to the district office on how each job's going, as well as visiting the 12 shires about every 3 months to make sure that they're doing their work right too, and also that the council's not fiddling the main roads.
We'll get onto that a bit later.
Righto. Okay.
So what would have been your pay then as you got elevated up? Do you remember?
I'd have to
We're
think.
nearly into dollars now.
Oh, we're into dollars now. It would have been probably $120, $130 a week, something like that. I was on a good wage.
Yeah. No, that was. I mean, it's amazing how all the wages have indexed over time. I mean, it's a bizarre
certainly
experience.
Is. Yep.
Yeah.
When you think nowadays that some young kid working at McDonald's can get $20 or $30 an hour, depending on overtime on that weekends and that sort of thing.
I remember when I was doing accountancy studies, we had a futuristic lecturer there. And he was fantastic, and he said one day a box of beer is going to be $50. And we used to think there is no way known. That was like 2 weeks' pay back in those days. And now a box of beer is about $50. And it's
well, I remember when the farm got sold at Tyro, it was regarded as one of the nicest farms in the district. Had probably 150 head of cattle, and 2 houses, a new tractor, miles and miles of fencing. The place was well organised.
On the river?
No, not on the river. Flat country, and it sold for $30,000.
There you go.
In 1967.
Should have held on to it.
Oh, unbelievable.
So then after Main Road, you eventually left.
Yeah, I was with them for quite a while actually. That was 1970, and anyway, I stayed there as the inspecting cost clerk at Toowoomba for 5 years. Oh, and the department gave you a vehicle. I was real flash, you know. I had this brand new 1970 Falcon, and I
had one of those.
I felt like $1 million.
Yeah, an XY.
X something.
Yeah. They were made out of real metal.
Anyway, I'll never forget the number plate. It was QGL 610. That was my first main roads car.
And you remember that?
And I can remember the second one too. It was 2 years later. It was QGN 877, but I can't remember any more after that. Okay. Anyway, in 1975, believe it or not, the inspecting cost clerk's job at Cairns came up. And I went home for lunch one day. I had no intentions of putting in for the job, but if I was working in town there at Toowoomba, I'd always go home for lunch because it was only about, wouldn't have been more than 2 or 3 kilometres from the office to where we lived in Toowoomba.
Yep.
And anyway, I went home for lunch this one day, and just in conversation, I said to Alice, they're calling for an inspecting cost clerk up at Cairns because the old fellow up there is retiring. And no, it was just a sort of a conversation thing.
Yep.
And Alice says, why don't you put in for it?
Mm.
And I said, I don't know. She said, it'd be nice to go somewhere different and get away from this cold weather. And I said, all right, I'll think about it. So I went back to the office and I sat there and I thought about it. And I thought, no, why not? I'll put in for it.
Mm.
So I did, and believe it or not, I got the job.
Yep.
And that was in 1975. So there was then a big shift with our two children. At this time, Jeff would have been 11 and Karen would have been 9. And so away we headed to Cairns.
And knowing no one up there.
No, didn't know anybody.
Yeah. Yep.
We had been there once before in our lives because prior to going back to the main roads in 1967, we decided, this is after the farm got sold, we decided we'd go for a trip to Cairns. So we hired a caravan and hooked it onto our utility, and away we went to Cairns.
Mm.
And we're only up there for a week or a fortnight. So it's the only time we'd ever been up there. But we quite liked it up there. It was a nice country. So anyway, I got that job at Cairns, and I was there from 75 until 82.
Right.
And we bought this lovely house up there, but by this time the price of a house had gone up to $30,000, and which was a lot of money in those days.
Yeah.
And so Els, for the first time in our married life, had to go out and work to help pay for the house.
Yeah. Yep.
So she got a job in the laundry at a Hyde's Hotel there in Cairns, which is one of the biggest hotels in the centre of town.
Right.
So she did that for the 7 years that we stayed in Cairns.
Right.
And but at the same time, I was went up through the ranks with the Army Reserve, and for 4 years, the Army used to fly me to Townsville every second weekend as an instructor at the Officer Training Unit.
Right.
And which was a great experience, really, because there's nothing. It was really great to work with young, enthusiastic people who want to become officers.
Yeah.
And they're generally intelligent, and they're enthusiastic, and they listen to what you talk about.
Disciplined,
you know. And even to this day, do you know Alan Campbell? His father used to be Mel Campbell, used to be the counsellor.
The counsellor here.
Yeah, well, his son.
Righto, yeah.
He's one of our volunteers.
Oh, righto.
And he was one of my cadets there at Townsville back in about 1976.
Right.
And he ended up as the OC of the Army Reserve here at Maryborough years later.
Yep.
He, in his last part in life, was he was the principal of the Billawheeler State High School.
Right.
And his lovely wife, Catherine, she was the principal of the Theodore State School.
Gee.
So anyway, they're retired now.
And back here.
They're back here down at Harvey Bay.
Yep.
And currently they're overseas tripping around, which they do quite regularly. But anyway, they're volunteers at the museum.
Yeah. It's a long association. So then we left Cairns in 82 to do what?
I started a business in military antiques.
Right.
At Gympie.
Yeah.
Buying and selling military antiques.
So you stepped away from a permanent good job ventured into small business.
Yes.
Big step.
the reason I did it was because a lot of my friends from down around this neck of the woods were businessmen,
Yep.
and I'm thinking to myself, well, I could do that too.
Yeah. So set up a shop, did you?
Worked it from our house at Gympie.
Yep.
And we'd put out catalogues.
Yep.
I'd travel all over Australia, attending fairs where you're buying and selling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Military fairs,
Yep.
Could be one on in Sydney, or might be Melbourne, or could be Adelaide, wherever. Brisbane.
You just drove there and...
Drove there or flew there.
Yep.
And bought and sold stuff. And, and we did very well out of it, actually.
Yeah, right.
And
So how long did you do that for?
Until 1988.
So 6 years, yeah. Do you employ any staff then, or was it just...
I had two. I had a man and a woman working for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman used to do all the clerical work. And the man, he used to be one of my salesmen.
Right.
And so, yeah, we did very well out of this business.
So that's till 88.
Till 88.
And then...
Then I sold the business to the fellow that was working for me.
Yeah.
And his name is Les Williams.
Oh, yeah.
And Les nowadays owns the Coolabah Motel at Blackall.
Yeah, we've stayed there. Yep.
Right. And he was our daughter's boyfriend, the daughter that we lost.
Yes, yep.
Back in 1982.
In 82.
Which we've sort of jumped over.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that that was certainly a tragic time.
Yes.
But, so you'd moved from Cairns back to Gympie?
In early 82.
Yep.
And then we bought the house at Gympie.
Yep.
And then at the end of 82, our daughter was living with us at home. She was 16.
Yep. And
our son was in the regular army.
Mm-hmm.
And he come home on leave, early leave, because his company was going to Malaysia in early 83.
Right.
And they wanted them all home so they could get them back early to get them all ready to go away. And anyway, he came home. I was in Sydney at the time, attending one of these fairs. And anyway, he bought an old car to run around in while he was home, an old VW.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, this one evening, while I was away, him and his sister, our daughter, and the daughter's boyfriend decided to go for a drive. And they went out along the road heading north out of Gympie, past, where the forestry location is there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where they turned around, and they're heading back in towards town again. And you know where the concrete works are there?
Yes, on the road.
Well, right there is where a semi-trailer, there was roadworks was happening at the time. This is night time, and there was a lot of dust in the air. And this semi-trailer loaded with watermelons come flying up behind their car and just ran into the back of it. And anyway, the three of them got thrown out on the road. But unfortunately, the daughter died more or less instantly.
Yes.
And the son died about half an hour later in hospital.
Right.
And Les Williams, he ended up with a fractured skull and a few broken ribs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, he survived, fortunately. And we've always regarded him as being like the Clayton son ever since.
Yeah. Yep.
And then he's the fella that I had working for me. I was telling you about a few minutes ago.
And he's the guy who's got the motel out west.
And then also he worked for me at the sawmill at Tyro, for many, many years.
Mm.
He ended up foreman there.
So when did let's just flick to that one now. When did you start that,
The sawmill.
the sawmill?
Yeah, that was on the 2nd of December 1988.
No wonder you remember number plates of cars. So in 1988.
Yes.
Right, from scratch?
From virtually scratch, yes.
Yep. And that was just you on your own?
With Gary Dale.
Righto, so you'd known Gary for a while, or?
I went to school with him.
Righto.
At Tyro, and
Yep.
we've been friends ever since.
Yep.
And he, as I told you, in '88, I sold the business to Les,
Yep.
and that was the military business. So I was looking for something different to do.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, Gary Dale rings me up one day. He said, I'm trying to get the sawmill off the ground at Tyro. He said, it's not going real well. Would you like to come and give me a hand?
Mm.
So I went and had a look, ran for my life. I thought, this is not for me, you know. Anyway, about 3 months later, he rings me up again and says, well, come and have another look. We've done a little bit more work since you were here last time.
Yeah.
So I went back, and it was a bit of an improvement. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I said, I'll come and work here for a month, just as a labourer,
Right.
doing,
Yep.
just to see whether this is the sort of thing I could live with.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, within the month, we'd been out and spent about $40,000 buying machinery, and so away it went. And that was early. We started the business on the 2nd of December '88, so it would have been November that we were.
Yep.
That I was working there for a month, you know.
And then you built that up. From my memory, it won a state small business award.
Oh yeah, we won many awards. And also we I don't know whether they still do it or not, but they used to have this private business. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Used to have this private business competition every year as to which is the biggest private business in Queensland.
Yeah.
Do they still do that?
No,
at all?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay, well, they used to, and I've got a certificate where we won it. It didn't win it, but we were, I think one year we were 87th biggest private business in Queensland.
Right.
And then the next year we were the 40th.
So how many people did you get up to employ?
450.
Wow, at Tyro.
No, that was right throughout Queensland.
Yeah. So you expanded and had different sawmills or
Yes.
distribution?
Yeah.
450.
Yeah, we had sawmills at Tyro, Mandabra, Monto, Dingo. That was.
Wow.
And then we had hardware stores at Maryborough, Harvey Bay, Bundaberg, Gladstone, Rockhampton, Townsville, Gordonvale. We had truss plants at where we have the truss plants at Maryborough, Rockhampton, Townsville, and Gordonvale.
Wow.
We ended up with, I think it was something like about 20 businesses.
So do you remember what your turnover had to be per week?
Well, I remember it, the best was, I always like telling the story. No, I think I've told you this one before, Chris, where when we first started that business back in '88, I made I was sitting with me liking figures.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm working out that, well, our first month of December 1988, we made $20,000 gross, right?
Yep.
And I reckon that if I did a few different things, we could make that maybe $100,000 for the month.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Well, blow me down. 14 years later, without skiding,
Yeah.
it was $3 million a week and 450 staff.
That's so that's a quick escalation of a business. That's
Too quick. Too quick.
Yeah. So I was going to get to that. I've found over my time businesses that go like that end up going like that,
Exactly.
and then they need, if they can be saved, and then steadily growth. I've always been a steady growth person as you keep building the foundation underneath.
Exactly. You are 100% correct. We started off in '88, and the business grew very quickly. And I think by
in '88, interest rates were 18%.
exactly.
And it was sort of around that time.
And we're just about to inherit Keating as the Prime Minister.
The disaster we had to have.
Yeah. And by October '93, we had our first $1 million month. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
My sales manager walked in and said, "John, we've just done $1 million for the month."
Did you celebrate?
Yeah, of course we did. And we used to always make sure that all the people we had working for us participated too.
Yeah.
And I mean, usually they were more than happy just with a 6-pack of beer.
Yeah,
That was
that
was good recognition to them.
Well, bringing everyone on the journey. I think that's my observation of you through the times that we've known each other, is that you have that capacity to bring people through on the journey. So it's a great reflection. That is an amazing business.
And anyway, we had this $1 million month in the October, and I think the November was $1 million month too. And then, down she went like this. And I mean, we were running 2 and 3 shifts a day there at the mill. We had to cut it back to 1 shift a day.
Yeah.
And we had to get rid of a lot of good staff.
Yeah.
I had to
That's
get
a
back.
hard thing to do, isn't it?
And I went back physically working again.
Yeah.
Because in the early days I was physically working, but then it became more of a management role.
Yeah.
But then I had to go back to, I had to set an example.
Yep.
You know. So I went back doing all the timber treating. Long hours, but had to be done. Oh, and in the meantime, I had cancer.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. That was 90.
1990. Yeah.
So you've that's been a journey in itself of defeating the cancer from 1990, because it came back a few times, hasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Can we just carry that one through, because it's interesting hearing your story now, that you've been willing to have a go and be the first to get cortisone, you know, and so I know when we've chatted about your ongoing struggle with the cancer, that you basically allow the doctors to experiment on you. That's my term. And you've 28 years later. So they wrote you off, didn't they, in 1990?
Well, yeah, back in 1990, I went to, well, the story was that I went to, Elsa and I went over to New Zealand for a holiday. We'd never been there before in our lives.
Yep.
And I'd been having a lot of trouble with indigestion. And when we were over there on the trip, of course, you're eating different style of food and all this sort of thing, and it was really playing up. And I said to Elsa, I said, when I get home, I said, I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to keep going until I find out what the problem is. Well, it didn't take too long to find out I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And anyway, I ended up going down in Brisbane for they opened me up to have a look, but the cancer was all through the arteries to the bowel, and it was right through the whole abdomen. And the doctor, the surgeon, just stitched me up and gave me to a oncologist and for chemotherapy.
Yep.
And so I did a full course of that, which is about 6 months. And of course, at the same time, I'm trying to run this business at Tyro. And I'll never forget. I would go down to Brisbane on a Friday we'd drive down on the Friday morning, Elsa and I, because there was no way in the world I could drive home.
No.
And I'd go and have this chemotherapy. Elsa would drive us back to Gympie, and by 6 o'clock in the evening, I would be as sick as anything. And I'd be sick until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and just dry reaching. And anyway, then I'd go into a slumber for a few hours, and then about 10 o'clock in the morning I'd wake up. I'd go and have breakfast, and we'd hop in the vehicle and I'd go back to work.
Yeah.
And I did this for the 6 months. But getting back to the doctor, I said to the doctor, the specialist, the oncologist, okay, what's the prognosis? And he says, I give you a 60-40 chance of living 2 years. Oh, okay. Oh, can I get a second opinion about this? And he said, of course you can. So he wheels me into another specialist, and he says 50-50. I thought, hang on, I'm going back to the first one again. And I had this attitude that, okay, that's 60-40, but if I use a positive attitude, I can turn this into 70-30. Now, this is starting to sound pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Yeah.
So my advice to anybody that's got cancer is that don't let it get you down. Just move on with life.
Yeah.
And I've got to say that I have not saved their lives, but lengthened their lives for quite a number of people by sitting down and talking to them.
Your story is such an encouragement to so many others.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
And that, to me, that's the encouragement. That's what this show's about as well. You know, this conversation.
I had this young fellow working for me there at the mill at Tyro, and he came to me one day. He said, John, he said, you've had cancer, haven't you? And I said, yes. He said, my mother's got cancer. He says, and she lived at Tanana. I can't think of her name now. And he said, he said, life in our house is terrible. He said, she just sits there in the lounge room and cries all day. Yeah. She doesn't cook. She doesn't do nothing. She won't leave the house. All she does just sits there and cry and cry. And he said, would you be prepared to come and have a talk to her? And I did.
Yep.
And anyway, a couple of weeks later, I said to the young fellow, I said, well, how's Mum getting on? Oh, he said, what a big improvement. He said, she's going out doing the shopping now, and she's cooking the meals again. And unfortunately, the poor woman, after about another 9 months or 12 months, she passed away. But it was just one of those classic examples of how you're able to help somebody.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with the fellow that took over from me at Toowoomba in 1975 when I went to Cairns. He ended up with cancer.
Yep.
He had cancer of the stomach. And I got to hear about it. And he, again, was sitting at home all day just moaning and groaning. And I said, get off your ass and get back to work again. You know, I knew him well enough.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, he did.
Yeah.
And he was able to work about 3 days a week. Unfortunately, he also passed on, but he lived a lot longer than what he would have.
It certainly is. It's a great encouragement to many, many people. So when did you start the museum? You sold?
Okay.
Dale and Meyers?
Yeah. What happened was in 2002 we bought all the Heinz outlets. This is all their truss plants and their
the hardware
sawmills and their hardware stores, right?
Yep.
Right throughout Queensland. Everyone they owned, we bought from them.
Yeah, that was a big step.
And that's where I was working something like 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. and just trying to get on top of it all.
Yeah.
And the cancer come back again.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, there's no way in the world I can fight cancer and run a business 18 hours a day, you know.
Yep.
So son's got to give.
Yep.
So anyway, I said to one of our new partners, which is Curly Tatnell, I said, well, Curly, I think it's time you took over as the manager. Because up until then, he was just a backseat passenger,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep.
And he said, yeah, all right, okay. So he took over as the CEO of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I virtually went into retirement. Elsa and I bought a van, this after treatment again. Elsa and I bought a van and went for a trip around Australia in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
I came back and did a little bit of work, not a lot, for the company, and but I wasn't real happy with the direction that the company was going. And I thought, well, instead of me just being upset and annoying other people about it all,
Yep.
I was better off to get out.
Yep.
So Curly and Gary and I was up in Cairns looking at another purchase of a business up there. And while we're up there, we're out having tea one night on the Esplanade, and I just said, how would you fellas like to buy my share in the business? Oh, okay. So anyway, we talked about it from there on. And it took something like about 18 months for it to all happen, you know, to get all the figures in place. So in 2000, around about 31st of May, I think, 2005, was the date that we actually did the settlement.
Righto.
But going back to 2004, wanting something to do in retirement, we bought that building there in Wharf Street and turned it into a museum. And one of the things that we always wanted to do was to do something in recognition of our children, in memory of them, and seeing this has been an excellent opportunity to commemorate them. And you'd remember Father Harry Bliss.
Yeah. Catholic Church.
We're not Catholics, and we're not church goers, but I had a lot of respect for Harry Bliss. And so much so that by this time he'd left Maryborough, and he was a priest down at a church in Brisbane somewhere. And I rang him up one day and said, listen, Harry, I'd like you to come up and bless our museum building in memory of our children. And Harry said, John, I'd love to do that. So in his Peugeot, or however you pronounce that car that he used to own. Peugeot. He whizzes up to Maryborough. And we did the service one evening. I got all the friends and relatives to come along to it. And Harry says to me, he said, John, he said, one of the rules in the church is, he said, when we leave a town and go somewhere else, we're not to go back and do weddings, baptisms, or anything.
Oh, right.
He said, no, I've made an exception of this. He says, so don't go telling anybody. He says, but and he was telling me a couple of days later, he said he stayed at the Catholic church overnight. But he was gone at about 5 o'clock in the morning before any of the locals woke up that he was in town.
He's only recently passed away.
Yes, very sadly.
So your museum. So it started with how much memorabilia?
Initially it was my memorabilia. It was stuff that I'd accumulated over many years as a collector, and that's where we started it all. And when I think back now to what it looks like now, to what it did then, It was bloody dreadful. God almighty. I don't know why anybody...
Embarrassing.
Oh, yeah, I don't even know why anybody come in the door, you know.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
you know, he's with excellent volunteers. You know, Darryl Blackley.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, people like him, I mean, he's been a stalwart now for 14 years.
Well, that's the other thing that amazes me is that your volunteer workforce. You know, you've got about 100. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's amazing for a... So it's people see a vision and because they like you as well. That's how I take it. And there's some charisma. There's something about you that people just want to get on the same path with you. And that's, to me, is part of the success of that museum. And now... I love bragging, and we've got the second best military museum in Australia here.
Absolutely.
As a tagline, and that's not just me now, it's many others who are more into the museum of military memorabilia. But even Brendan Nelson, it's one of his favourite spots to come up and have a look at, isn't it?
Yeah, he loves the place. And just recently I sent him an email about something. It was sort of to tell him about something that was going on, and I just said that the museum was going very well, and he sends back a short reply and says, "John, I would not expect it to be anything other."
Yeah, that's right. So now there's about $16 million worth of
16 to 17. Yeah,
memorabilia there. It's an amazing collection. So. And just of late, I've noticed there's more of a push by educators and also schools for young ones to, in this, for many that's an insecure future, or that they can't see, the future so clearly. But to see the future, you need to go back into the past a bit, and I think...
Exactly.
So your museum is really now into that focus, and you're getting a lot of schools through.
Yes, we are. And interestingly, only tomorrow, if you'd like to come down and meet him, you'd love his story.
Yeah.
I thought mine was a good story, but this one's, I think, better. Darryl, just can't think of his last name off the top of the head. But he's the managing director of Kangaroo Bus Lines.
Oh, yeah, that's a big business.
Yes, yes. I've been there.
Right.
Unbelievable. And I love their professionalism, you know?
Yeah.
Every one of the buses is, it looks like $1 million.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a dirty bus.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And they're all 100% mechanically sound. They're just their whole operation. If you wanted to see how to run a professional operation, this is the one to go and see. They've got something like 150 buses. Yeah. And a lot of them are big ones, you know.
Yeah, it takes 60 people. Okay. Yep.
And it's a business that started from nothing.
I love those stories.
Anyway, this fellow's going to be at our museum tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Hopefully about 10:30.
So he's the owner of the business?
Yes, him and the family. And it's a privately owned business.
So he's bringing his family up, or is it?
I'm not sure, but he's I dare say his family will be with him. He's got a motorhome. Yep. And he's heading to Rockhampton.
Right.
And he's calling in to see us.
Very good.
And I've met him. Yep. When I went to Sydney there a few weeks ago, and I called in and on invitation I called in and visited them on the way through at Burpengary. That's where their headquarters are. Right. But Chris, if you ever get an opportunity, and I know you like seeing good businesses, this is one that's really worth visiting because I just shook my head from the moment I walked through the door until I walked out. I mean, they have this special machine that washes buses. Yeah. You know, it just goes around the bus and it's doing the top and it's doing the sides. And then when that bus moves out, another one comes in, and
Yeah,
this thing goes around it too.
it's amazing. Yeah, no, it's a great encouragement to see people still having a go.
Oh, this is
And,
incredible.
Yeah. So, all right. So just one quick one as we come to a close. Things like the internet, isn't it amazing?
Yes,
You
it
would
is.
never have thought, wouldn't have been dreamt of, would it?
No. Unfortunately, I'm not a great user of it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting that I know people in their 90s
yeah.
that are prolific users of it,
Nearly addicted.
and I got people that are in their 60s that are not interested.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like it's, and I'm sort of that in between one that I was a bit too old for. Well, I thought I was a bit too old for when it started,
Yeah,
and I've never grown with it. You know, so I don't really have the enthusiasm for it.
no, but you can see it's got pluses and minuses.
Absolutely,
You know,
yes.
and but it's as we're changing, a workforce is changing,
Mm.
and but yeah,
But
yeah. Sorry.
It's incredible. Like the other day, and Steve Webb.
Yeah. Character.
Yeah, well,
I'm going to get him on the conversation.
No, well, I would recommend that. He's only got 4 days work left. He finishes up Friday next week,
I'll send him a text today.
and he's definitely a fella that's worthy of interviewing.
Having a chat with you.
But anyway, on Monday night we're at McDonald's. We go there quite regularly on Monday nights. There was 10 of us solving the world problems, including Gloria and Kevin Banting.
They only buy a cup of coffee, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, sometimes somebody has something to eat, but I won't eat any of their rubbish food. Anyway, well, hey, they might sue me. I've got to. But they do make beautiful coffees.
Yeah.
And anyway, while we were there, his phone rang. You know, his little
Yeah.
what do you call it?
Yeah, mobile.
Yeah, the one with the screen on it.
Yeah, smartphone.
Smartphone.
Yeah.
And there he is looking at his daughter, and his daughter's looking at him.
Yeah.
And she's out in the coal mine somewhere, Maryborough or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Amazing.
She's a governess with, well, it's probably not the right word, but babysitter.
Yeah. Jack of all trades.
Because the husband and wife both work in the mine. They got 3 children.
Yeah.
So she looks after 3 children.
Yeah,
They're
right.
all preschool age or something, you know.
Yeah. A nanny.
Nanny, that's the word.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, there's opportunities, you know, that keep
She's
evolving.
been doing that now for about 18 months.
Yep. Now, we'd just like to finish with something that a lot of people don't know about you. So it's something to finish with. So it's been a very great, frank and open conversation. But is there something that people don't know about you? I'll give you as an example. My son Jason went down to a conference in Adelaide recently, and they were late arriving to it, and the guy said, well, because you've arrived late, you're going to have to tell us something that a lot of people don't know about you. So think of something. So Jason said, well, you people here wouldn't know that my father was the first mayor of Queensland to ever be sacked. To which the presenter said, and I know who sacked him, and I won't get into that at this stage. So it was quite a humorous connection. And so is there something that you haven't told a lot of people that you might like to tell today?
Well, I probably find that a bit hard to answer, Chris, on the basis that I've always been a very open
Yeah.
person in life.
Mm.
I don't keep secrets.
No,
And
no.
I wear my life on my sleeve, so to
Yeah,
speak, you know.
yeah.
And so
No, that's good. See, that to me is part of the key of a long and healthy life, isn't it? No secrets, no surprises, and just keep telling the truth,
Yep.
you know, on the way, and then you can live freely. You don't have to remember the lies you've told. You know, that's where people can go nutty in the head, I think.
But when I think back about life, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by lots of loving family
Yes.
and friends
Yes.
and people that have worked for me,
Yeah.
people that are still involved with me as far as the museum is concerned.
Yep.
Because as I've told many, many times, I mean, Els and I couldn't run that museum on our own,
No,
you know.
no.
And I mean, I know now, what is it? It's 8:05. One of the volunteers will already be there, and they've opened the door and
Yeah.
be cleaning the leaves up, and
Yep.
you know. And
Fantastic.
he does this 6 days of the week,
Well, yep.
and so the 7th day we let the leaves build up.
Give them a rest. Yeah.
But no, it's
So watch the future. What are you heading into? What do you continue with the museum in the similar
absolutely
capacity?
yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've always been one that's what's the right wording? Ambitious. I love a challenge.
Yeah.
That's probably the
It might
right.
be why we get on well.
Yeah, yeah. I've always respected you, and I've always that's why I've supported you like I have.
Yeah, thank you.
And you know, you're another person that you wear your life on your sleeve, and it's just so wrong as to what's happened over the last couple of years. But I mean, regardless of whatever the end up result, you still have the satisfaction that if it hadn't have been for you, that things wouldn't be improved like they are at the Fraser Coast Council.
Yeah.
You know?
Thanks, John.
I mean, it's your drive that's done it, but you're the one that's had to suffer as a result.
Yeah.
But you can still look back with satisfaction over the whole thing.